Good evening, everybody, as our guests roll in. Our students, no one here is as a guest.
And talk to him, now you talk to him.
Good evening. Hello.
Hello. Hello. I'm just admitting folks as we, there we go. We got Sheila coming in.
He has us on mute, Bruce.
Here we go. Wonderful. Another minute of admitting folks, and then we'll get started.
We're slow getting in because the program had to update.
Yeah, it's okay. You're fine. You're not late. Everything is good. I find myself drinking coffee at 7 o'clock at night. Short term, it'll be good for me. It may make for a long evening, but good to get motivated. All right, well, it's 7:02 and looks like we've got a good set of numbers here. And as people come in, we'll welcome them. All right, so let's do this. Let's greet each other, and you can unmute as you do it. I'll just say hi to you and you say hi back, and that way we can make sure that your mics are working and make sure that your name is on your screen. That would be good. Okay. And change it up if you'd like to change up your screen just to reflect that it says, if there's two of you there, put both of your names on your screen.
You want your name on it too?
You can put my name on there if you want.
Well, you're not showing though, but okay.
Well, I can make
We're not needed.
So, I don't know, but-
All right. All right, we'll start with Linda Mins. Linda Mins.
Hey, we're just changing our name.
All right. Good to see you. Good to see you both. Hello. What was for dinner?
Nothing yet.
Nothing yet.
Oh. What's cooking? What's cooking? What's for dinner?
Popcorn. We had a big lunch. We went out for lunch.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right. I see Sharon. Hey, Sharon.
Hey, Rabbi. I'm Sharon Lane.
Hi, Sharon. Good to see you. All right. And Bev. I see Bev.
Hello, Mickey is actually in the background. He's over there. He's over there.
All right. I
But
believe.
he's got you tuned on the TV.
All right. Sounds good. Mickey.
It's
I see Ann Rollins here. Hello, Ann.
Hello, everybody.
Good to see you. Good to see you. All right. I got Amy and Bruce here.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Good to see you guys. Good to see you guys. Judy. Nice to see you on the Brady Bunch screen. All right. I see Jerry Penn here. Hi, Jerry.
Hi, everybody.
Good to see you.
We'll just get them in there when they talk.
All right. And I see Bob and Denise.
Hey there.
Hi.
Nice.
How are you?
Good. I don't see you well because you're on your phone, but I know it's you.
Yeah, it's on my phone.
Denise, I'm sorry I missed you today. I heard you were out and about in my neighborhood.
I was.
All right. I'm sorry I missed you.
That's all right.
Jablos, I see you here.
We're here.
We don't know how to put Mitch's name on the screen.
My name, yeah, we're not sophisticated enough to do that.
Let's see. Now I have control. So Mitch, I can name you anything I want. All
You
right.
wouldn't be the first.
I got you. I got you. There you go. There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Got it. I see Stan Kaufman. You're muted. I hope that's
I'm
okay.
muted now, and Naomi's here too, on her own computer.
All right, there she is. Good. Okay, good to see you guys. I feel like it's been a minute. All right. Sheila, I see you.
Hello there.
Hello.
Jerry might come. He's cleaning the kitchen.
As he should.
Right,
Place.
right.
Good, good, good. All right. Watchmans. I see Saul and Kyle. You guys want me to change your screen name?
Go ahead.
Thank
Yeah, thank you.
Let's see here. What should I rename you, Kyle?
Whatever you want.
Jeffrey Jacobson in the house.
I am in the house, and I think Vicky's going to be joining me in a couple of minutes. I was just getting off the phone with a lady I met at the temple, Cheryl Dorsinski from the Atlanta Israel Coalition,
Yep.
regarding House Bill 30, which was delayed again today, the vote, but I don't want to take up time. I'll reach out to you about that.
All right, and you're doing something for them. You were telling me you're
Well, I'm the new treasurer.
okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's good, Jeff. I'm glad to see you getting involved.
Thank you.
Gruskins,
Hello.
Hi, good evening.
you're here.
Yes, we are.
Do you want me to rename you something?
No, we can keep it as it is.
All right.
Thank you.
You got it. All right. John Laszlo, nice to see you, John. John, you're muted. I don't know if you mind. I can't unmute you, unfortunately. There you are. Hey, John, how you doing?
Yeah.
Good. Good, good, good. All right, I see Joy.
No,
Oh, Joy. Good to
Richard's on a different screen.
see. All right, I'll track him down in a second.
You can rename him.
All right, I might. All right, Egberts, twice in a week. I feel like what is this, the high holidays or something? You have to unmute. There you go.
There we go.
You can rename us too.
What do you want me to rename you?
Maxine and John would be just fine.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, I could get more creative.
Well,
As you wish.
I wish. Okay. And John, is it J-O-H-N or J-O-N?
J-O-H-N.
There it is. All
Thank
right,
you.
Here you got. Roz, I see you.
Hello.
Hello, hello. Good to see you. Stacy, I see you.
Hello.
Nice
How are
to-
you, Rabbi?
Well, how are you?
I'm good. Just raced home so I could be on this call. I'm still in my work clothes, so
Yeah, no problem. Me too.
I'll probably turn my video off for a minute, but I'm here.
What you want? Elliot, my man, the big 5-0. I think you're muted.
There you go.
There you go. Elliot, are you unmuted?
Trying to unmute.
Oh, no, yeah, it's funny. I hear you, but it says that you're muted. That's weird. All right. Well, hey, glad to see you. Oh, I see. 'Cause you have a screen and it looks like you've got another device for the sound. Is that right? It works. It's fine. It's fine. All right. I see Richard Salenfeld here. Dustin, you're here.
Yeah, Dustin and Dana are here.
Dustin and Dana. Okay. All right. And I'm just gonna Dustin and Dana. All right. Boom. All right. And Charlie Cohn. Charlie, I'm very glad to have you here, even if I can't see you.
Picture. We're not in picture.
All right, folks. So I'm going to be, whenever we're doing the online learning, there are a couple challenges with how to engage with the conversation and share the documents. I mean, at this point, we've got the sharing part down. So I'm going to ask everyone to do is to mute your screen if you would. Okay, and I'm going to share my screen and bring up the docs that we're going to need for today. So hang on a second, everybody see that? Someone to give me a thumbs up that you can see it. Thank you, Bruce. Okay. Let me just move this over here. Okay. So this is the latest course in Temple Emanu-El's lifelong learning. Jeff, are you raising your hand? All right, just send me something in the chat if you like.
No, you said raise the hand if you could see it. So that's
Oh, yeah,
why-
good. Yeah, just a thumbs up. Okay, good. Thank you.
Sure.
So,
sorry.
it's all right. So Temple Emanu-El's lifelong learning, for the most part, the way that we're doing things these days are mini mesters. So classes of 3 in a course. Tuesday nights, we Zoom only. And then the same class is taught in person Wednesday at noon, or at least it's the same agenda. All right, the same syllabus. Of course, each class is going to be different. You can mix and match. You can do online one week and in person the next week. Okay, we're doing this for your convenience. Each class is meant to build onto the next. So ideally, you come to all 3 in a course of 3. But if you can only come to 1 or 2, you should still do it. You'll get a lot out of it. Like all of the courses that we're doing, anything that we're using Hebrew for, we're also using translation, right? And the idea is that you are all smart people who know how to learn and maybe not a particularly well-versed in the subject that we're teaching. And sometimes, who knows, maybe the rabbi is teaching is not particularly well-versed. Sometimes it's an exploration of a particular topic rather than dissemination of a particular type of information. So this course is called The Jewish Civilization. Notice how I'm raising my voice at the end to convey a question, like our British friends do. The Jewish Civilization, all right, is it a thing? Is it a thing? And this is a question which is fairly old, meaning whether we're a civilization or not. In that language, it probably goes back to 1920s with Mordecai Kaplan, who first termed the modern phrase of a Jewish civilization. But if you look at the translations and the Hidush, the vision of particular sages throughout the ages, even if they didn't have the word civilization, this perhaps is what they meant. Asking a question, is Judaism a civilization? So here we start with sort of the overall plug for the course. What are we Jews? And what is Judaism? Are we a people? Are we a culture? Are we a religion? Or something even more profound? From our inception, we Jews were tapped to become and bring to the world a new way of being, of interacting, and of inspiring. Through Jewish text, liturgy, history, and politics, we examine the idea behind a Jewish civilization and the state that it's in today. Okay, that's a pretty broad view and pretty broad goal, actually. And so we're going to attack it from a particular angle today. Just so you know, when we're doing this, it's the next 3 Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and they're listed here. 7 to 8 p.m. on Tuesday nights, noon to 1 in person, likely in the Colbert Library. All right, we're going to look at a couple different questions, and if you have a pen or a pencil with you, it would behoove you to just have that ready, mostly so you can jot some notes down. Like all of the courses that I teach, just about all of them, there is a personal component to it, as well as a group component. So if you have a writing utensil, I'll pause while you get it out, just so, and you should have something to write things down on as well. So let's start with some easy ones here. And since I can't see everybody, I'll ask that you sort of pause and then unmute yourself. Let's start with some easy ones. Let's name some great civilizations. Go ahead. Yep.
Babylonian.
Babylonia. Good. What else?
Roman.
Let's do it again.
Rome or Greece?
Rome. Greece. Yeah. Okay. What other ones?
Western civilization.
Okay. Western civilization, a broad approach. Yep. Western civilization. Okay. Though we have to define that. What else?
Egyptian,
The Mayans,
Mayans, okay, sure, great civilization. Other ones,
Ottoman?
Ottoman. Any modern great civilizations out there?
American,
Maybe America. Yeah, maybe. Right, we have to see if we fit the definition. Other ones?
Israel,
Israel, yep, maybe.
maybe.
The other
China.
Yep, okay, for sure. China seems to fit. Well, when we get into the definitions, the other one that's usually mentioned in the definitions in the scholarly articles is the British Empire, the British civilization. Okay, now there are many other ones, but if we're looking at modern ones, okay, so now I'm back to my screen. Okay, so for each of these, what makes them a civilization? What makes a civilization a civilization?
Its accomplishments,
Okay, so accomplishments. What kind of accomplishments would justify calling a people or a country a civilization?
their rules of law, their education,
Okay, rules of law,
Cultural.
education, culture. What's culture?
art,
Music.
Art, science.
Art, science, music. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think the,
time.
yes, length of time.
Length of time. Okay, so something about a duration. Okay.
It seems like all the ones that we've listed, though, were governmental agencies or states to that extent. They had some set of government somehow, whether it was an empire, a kingdom, a
They had an
monarchy.
organization.
Rule and order,
Organized.
Ellen, that's what you meant. Rule and order.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
makes sense, right? In order to have law and rule and order and culture, art, and that type of thing, usually one sort of depends on the next and the next and the next. And the auspices that usually we call those accomplishments are usually under some form of government, right? Government is what allows people to, be safe and have enough to eat and pursue art and that type of thing. Maybe. What else?
Also, evidence.
Language.
A language. Okay. Jeff, you were saying something?
Yeah, evidence of all these accomplishments and rules of law, whether it's from hieroglyphics in the ancient times in the caves to other writings, or just having something now that we can look back and confirm what we thought about that civilization.
Right. So that goes with durability, right? It's not just that they've been around for a long time, but there's evidence, right? And the evidence has to last, right? So you named a couple different types of evidence: writing, hieroglyphs. What are other types of evidence of a great civilization?
It's these scrolls.
Okay, scrolls. What else?
Buildings.
Buildings.
They have some kind of organized defense to where they can not be conquered.
Okay, that probably goes into the long lasting and durable, right? If someone can just walk over you, you're probably not going to last very long. Ellen had said buildings. I'll put
How about writing on cave walls when they did the pictures on cave walls?
Sure. I mean, certainly that's evidence that somebody existed. Whether that's evidence of a great civilization, I'm not sure. But to Ellen's point about the buildings, and under the auspices of buildings of a great civilization, we might put
Monuments.
statues.
Widespread, how widespread it is.
Okay, now one monument and statue might not make a civilization. Many would be more indicative. Now, what about some collaborative evidence that a civilization existed and was great? How would we find that?
Artifacts.
archaeology,
Yep, good. Artifacts and archaeology, especially if the artifacts and archaeology talk about what a great civilization this other civilization was. Right? So that sometimes comes in the form of military treaties or the steles or anything along these lines, which talk about other cultures that existed at the time that were great and admirable for various reasons. Okay, back to my screen. We're going to go back and forth here. All right. So now let's pivot for a second. Let's talk about Judaism. Judaism has been described as a people and a culture and a religion. These three things. So my question to us to delve into, and this is called the set context, how are we each of these things? And how are we not only these things? Let's start with Judaism as a people. Roz, convince me that Judaism is a people, that describes a people.
Well, I'm not sure because, okay, there are people that can trace their heritage for hundreds of years, but there are those that are Jewish that have converted, but
Yeah.
they're still a people.
Can't understand her.
Yeah, I understood her. I understood her. So maybe that's maybe it's something on the mic on your end. Roz, so I heard what you're saying. You're saying that we're not ubiquitous and we're not we're not all the same, right?
That's right.
That you have some people who can trace their Judaism way back, but others are new to it. Fine, that's pretty good. Okay, Lou Gruskin, convince me that Judaism is fair to be described as a people.
We have something in common amongst us that holds us together as a people.
Great. What is
it? It could be a belief. It could be part of the culture of what we are. But when we see another Jew or meet another Jew, there is a connection, and that makes us a people.
Okay. All right. So actually, I love it how you sort of, went around something and then sort of backed into it. And what I got from you on that is, okay, there's something, right? But that something may not be, and this is not a great scientific reason, but it doesn't mean it's not true, right? That reason might be that we feel a connection, we feel a kinship with other people who are Jewish, even if, and I'm going to insert something you didn't say, even if they don't look like us or don't speak our language, right? Or from another part of the world, or even, right, when we're reading about Jews from a different time, with all of those things, that there's a kinship that we feel. Okay. Richard Sauenfeld, talk to me more about Jews as a people. How are we a people? Richard, you there?
He's having technical difficulty.
Okay. Then I'm going to call on somebody else.
I think they have the same, a lot of them have the same mannerisms and the way they do things. It's all the same way.
Yeah, I mean, that would describe a people if we were talking about like the Icelandic people, right? There's probably the same mannerisms, the same customs, right? Now, Jews, we're from all over the place. You got Jews from India, you got Jews from China, from Poland, from Iraq, from Canada. So we can
But
look
there are rituals that we all follow as Jews.
and are the rituals religious rituals, or are there other types of rituals?
I think both. I
Right.
mean, there's certainly commonality from a religious perspective, but there's also non-religious ways that, we unite as Jewish people.
Good. All right, very good. So let me sort of go to it on this one. So if you're a Jew from Ashkenaz, meaning that your ancestors, whether it's you, your parents, or grandparents, or great-grandparents, came from what's called the Pale of Settlement, right? Today, Lithuania, Poland, Russia, Ukraine, right? Those folks, those Ashkenazi Jews, for the most part, are going to have shared much of what defines usually a people, at least in the past. However, we Jews are not relegated to just those particular areas, right? Jews from Sephard, North Africa, okay, including Spain, the Iberian Peninsula, are going to have commonalities that are very different than those Jews from Ashkenaz, even though as a group, they're going to share a lot with each other. By the way, Jews from India, totally different group. Jews from Italy, totally different group. So we're a people, but we're more than just a people. We seem to be made up of lots of different people within the idea of peoplehood. Culture is the same thing and more obvious, right? The mannerisms of the Jew from India are probably going to resemble his Jewish neighbors, okay? And are going to be very different from the Jew from England and her neighbors, or Iraq and her neighbors, culturally. Now, religiously, let's take an honest look here, right? Certainly these days, religiously, there are commonalities between the various types of Jews religiously, but it seems to me there's many more differences, at least to me, than commonalities, right? Look at the professed belief and practice of the involved Reform Jew with the involved Hasidic Jew. They're almost like different religions at this point, okay? Now, what we can trace, or we claim to be able to trace, is a common history, at least in a general sense, right? Going back far enough, there's a belief, although it might be sort of a, tongue-in-cheek belief, that we're all descended from the same Jewish ancestors, maybe, right? I say belief because genetically it seems to be fairly unlikely. But if you look at the practices of the ultra-Orthodox Jew, I'm just talking about today, and the Reform Jew, the practice is almost totally different, with the exception of the big things that seem to be in common, right? Reverence for Torah, at least the broad strokes of worship, the lionization of the lessons from history, and if you're romantic, the idea that maybe we share a common destiny. And we had a couple points there, Amy, and then Saul.
Well, I was going to say, because I live with one foot in the Orthodox world because of my son and my 8 grandkids. And it is so true that we don't practice our Judaism the same way, but we have the basic tenet of belief in one God. We do Shabbat. We do it differently, but we do Shabbat. Those kind of things are what made, I grew up small town Mississippi, but we did Shabbat every Friday night. That was part of what made us a Jew. And I think that even though my son's family is so ultra religious, we still observe Shabbat. We still observe the holidays, even though we eat different things and we do
different things, observe them differently, right? Perhaps make Shabbat special in a very different way, not nearly as concerned not at all with halakha, Jewish law, right? For the involved Reform Jew, halakha, Jewish law informs us, but it doesn't mandate what we do and don't do, right? We say it has a vote, not a veto, as opposed to if you are an Orthodox Jew, and again, we're just talking about today. We haven't gotten through the history and going horizontally geographically. Traditionally, an Orthodox Jew lives and breathes and dies by halakha, and specifically what the halakha of her or his immediate rabbi says, which is based on a certain trend. Okay, now I'm back to our sharing the screen. Okay, so now we're on question 5. Based on how we began the conversation 10 minutes ago about what makes a civilization, would the term civilization better describe what Judaism is better than either of those individual terms? People, because we're a people, but not just a people. A culture, well, we have cultures, but there is no one Jewish culture. And a religion, now, in theory, it's all one religion, but the differences between the different sides of the religion and the different ways that the religion has been expressed and is expressed is disparate. So would the term civilization, we think, based on our earlier conversation, be a better term to describe what Judaism is. So let's go back to what makes a civilization a civilization. And let's see if Judaism either has it or had it, right? So let's start with the language piece. We have a language?
Yeah.
Yes.
No.
Yeah. And you can
Yes.
actually argue that we have multiple languages, right? So Hebrew is the dominant Jewish language. There's two sort of sub-Jewish languages, traditional Jewish languages. You've got Yiddish and Ladino, right? At one point, I've heard this, I'm not an expert on this, but I've heard that there's upwards of 80 Jewish languages that were specific to Jewish communities throughout the world, that sort of over the course of time with Darwinism, right, and the conquering of different parts of civilization got reduced to those two. That at one point, the lingua franca, the language that most Jews spoke at around the year 0 was not Hebrew, but Aramaic. And right now, most Jews in the world speak one of two languages, either Hebrew or English. Now, is English a Jewish language? No. Right? Does anybody who's not Jewish speak Hebrew? Yes. Up until the late 1800s, almost nobody spoke Hebrew for the last 2,000 years. Hebrew was used much like Latin. Right? Hebrew was used as the language for prayer, and you studied text that was in Hebrew, but you didn't speak Hebrew. You spoke whatever your native language was, maybe Yiddish or Ladino or German or what have you. Then with the different Aliyot movements going back into Israel in the 1800s, there was an attempt, okay, and a successful one clearly now that you have 6 million people speaking it, to reinvent or reclaim this ancient Hebrew language as a spoken language. So, okay, let's just say that, yes, we have a language. What are the other criteria of a civilization as we brought it up? Sheila, what was the one that you said?
We have laws
Laws. And where are our laws?
in the Torah.
Okay, so they're in Torah, they're in Talmud, right? Talmud is a legal doctrine. It's got some other stuff in there. It's called what's called Agadah, which is essentially midrash in the Talmud. But it is a set of legal doctrines that expand on the text, which is Torah, and Torah essentially functions as the Jewish constitution. Now, just like any law, over time there's more and more interpretations as new situations come up. The new situations with Jews have to do with temporal linear time. With every age and every new place, there's new situations and there's new, what's called responsa, interpretations of that law to deal with the modern piece. So for instance, can you ride a bicycle on Shabbat? Well, there's no bicycles back in Torah times, no bicycles in Talmud times, and yet, trust me, there's a whole book of literature based on, previous laws that have been put out. Can you ride a bicycle on Shabbat? Okay, so we have laws. Jeffrey, what was your piece that you brought up with a civilization?
Well, evidence of the civilization over a period of time.
Okay, so is there evidence that Jews and Judaism existed, let's just start with a long time ago?
Absolutely. And also, I think the civilizations we've discussed before died out. Ours is probably one of the longest enduring ones.
Great. So you got 2 points.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One is, and this goes back to the civilizations before. One was, is there evidence that they did exist back then and that they were impactful? We have a number of sets of evidence just to sort of play it out. Number one is Torah, right? We have this one particular book of literature and laws and stories which has withstood thousands of years. We have archaeological evidence that Jews were around a long time ago, and most of that is in the land of Israel, but you can also look at other places like the island of Elephantine in Egypt, which is on the Sudan border, where you had Jewish garrisons for Pharaoh guarding against attacks from the south, right? And there's all sorts of Jewish evidence there. So you have evidence of Jews going way back. And Jeffrey, your point was that if there is something that endures, not just the evidence, not just the writing on the proverbial cave wall, right? But if it's still relevant and there, that is even a bigger check towards a civilization. And clearly we're still around. The teachings that we have are still around, right? One could say the mission that we have is still around. The impact that we have on the world is, you know, still significant and probably always was, although ebbing and flowing depending on our numbers and the state of the world.
Just to follow, can I follow up one real quick on that? That they've said that whether it's the Ethiopian Jews or some of the Jews who got, you know, lost tribes, that, sorry, to turn my phone off. Sorry. That even if they weren't allowed to practice Judaism throughout hundreds of years and decades, and that they passed along some prayers that when they got to Israel, they had certain chants and prayers that were evidence that they had been practicing in some shape or form for hundreds or thousands of years from their ancestors, that because they couldn't openly practice, but they still had some of the same traditions that we do.
Good. And what I'll extract from that is a sign of a healthy civilization is constant innovation. Constant innovation. And whether it's because of outside pressures or inside pressures or what have you, Jews and Judaism have had to, been forced to innovate. And sometimes under those dominant cultures of pressure, we've had some of our most profound innovations. One or two more. Elliot, something else that defines a civilization or a great civilization, and do Jews and Judaism have it?
If I can get off mute. Can you hear me? Okay. Wow. It's like Family Feud. You've run out of questions.
Okay, that's fine. Anybody have, go ahead.
You know what I find interesting is that, I mean, to some extent, Judaism it's a scattered civilization, right? Like most civilizations are limited by the land that they inhabit, or conquer, or maintain for years. So we've managed to survive with all of these cultures and observances while we're not even all together.
Beautiful. And I would add to that a sign of a great civilization is a lasting influence that's attributed to them, right? We look at Roman law or Greek architecture, right? Or, you know, Italian aesthetics, whatever it may be. There are different signs of something, you know, that is lasting and influential, right? And Jews, we don't have it with our architecture, right? Nobody talks about Jewish architecture very much, or Jewish military, although we certainly had military and militaries in the past. But we are known for a couple different things in terms of civilization, primarily ethical monotheism, right? The idea that, you know, there is one, not many, in terms of a deity, and that there is such thing as right and wrong, an ongoing legal system, and I'd probably say more than anything, a philosophy that we can be impactful on the world, and the world needs a particular impact. Now, what we're going to do now is look at an article, a drosh. Hang on. Because we have an hour, I am keeping track of time here. So we're going to look at an article, well, really a drosh from Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. Those who've studied with me before, you know I love me some Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. He died about 2 years ago. He was the chief rabbi of Great Britain. He was the provost of Yeshiva University, Orthodox rabbi, ultra-Orthodox rabbi, who also had a PhD in philosophy and is prolific in his writings. This is one of the, you can see the spelling of civilization. This is an English spelling. So you're going to see things in here and don't think I made a mistake, or maybe I did, but there's English spelling involved in all of this. And he has prolific writings that we use all the time. He's very good at many things, including making some very old Jewish assumptions and religious statements accessible, in part because of juxtaposing modern secular sources. This particular one you probably haven't seen before unless you have the Chief Rabbi's Haggadah. All right, so this one I've not seen anywhere else, but Rabbi Jonathan Sachs has a Haggadah, and he's got a number of essays at the beginning of the Haggadah, okay, the book that we use for Passover Seder, and this is one that I thought was particularly good. I'm going to read through it with you, and then there's clearly some questions that I want us to ponder. The main one is, based on Rabbi Sachs's drash, what we're about to read, does that help you or prohibit or hinder you from understanding Jews and Judaism as a civilization? Okay, so he first has a quote from Genesis Rabbah. Just means it's a part of a compilation of midrashim, stories between the stories on the book of Genesis. Okay, this is the way that the rabbis throughout the ages tried to make sense of the socio-political realities that they saw themselves in vis-a-vis Torah text. Okay, it's a creative interpretation. So now it starts, like all of them do, with the actual a quote from Torah, and I will make your seed as the dust of the earth, from Genesis, talking about the prolificness that God promises the Jewish people, that we will be as numerous as the stars in the sky and the dust of the earth. Okay, now we have the Midrash explaining that verse. As the dust of the earth is from one end to the other, so your children will be dispersed from one end of the world to the other. As dust is trodden by all, so your children will be trod upon by the peoples of the world. As dust outlives all vessels of metal and endures forever, so other nations of the world will cease to be, while Israel endures forever. Right, this is a classic way. So the rabbis, let's call them 8th century rabbis, look at the Jews and say, hey, we're not as numerous as lots of other nations. How could this be true? And look at our situation. How could this be true? And now they say, the rabbis say, yeah, well, it's like dust, right? You're dispersed, you're trodden on, okay, by all these different people, but you're going to outlast all these other vessels. Interesting. Continuing. This is Sachs. Travel to Egypt today. Is this large enough, or you want me to make it larger? Anybody want me to make it larger? A little bit larger? Let's see here. Let's see what I can do. Boom. All right. Travel to Egypt today, and you can still see the great temples built by Ramses II, assumed by most scholars to be the pharaoh of the Exodus, Luxor, Karnak, Abu Simbel. They still stand. 3,000 years later, in less than their former glory, astonishing achievements that seem to defy time. Yet the civilization that produced them is no more. The Egypt of the pharaohs was one of the greatest and most long-lived of the empires of the ancient world. But already, by the time of Ramses II, it had reached its peak, and shortly thereafter began its long decline. By the time of Alexander the Great, it was a shadow of its former glory, and it fell to the Greeks. Like other imperial powers, in its day, it bestrode the narrow world like a colossus, and then faded into oblivion. The monuments remain, but the culture that brought them forth was all too mortal. Among the builders of those monuments were a small migrant people known to the Egyptians as Hebrews, Ivrim, meaning nomads, people who wander from place to place without a fixed home. In the late 19th century, great interest was aroused by the discovery in an Egyptian village known as El Amarna, a catch of some 350 clay tablets dating back to the 15th century BCE, written in Akkadian. They contain reference to a group known as Hibiru, who seemed to bear some similarity to the Israelites of that time. They too were a nomadic group who appeared from time to time, arousing fears on the part of the other residents in the land of Canaan. There's even a record in the form of 2 papyri from the reign of Ramses II of Hebrew workers being employed to transport materials for the pharaoh's construction projects. Scholars today are less likely to identify the Hebrew of the Amarna letters with the Hebrews of the Bible. The word appears to be not the name of a specific group, but a genetic description for roaming groups of marauders. The existence of such groups may help to explain why a powerful empire like Egypt, please mute your screen. But existence of such groups may help to explain why a powerful empire like Egypt regarded the Israelites as a threat. Some centuries before, it had suffered an invasion from the east by a group known as the Hyksos, who seized hold of the country for 160 years, and the memory remained. Egypt was on its guard against outsiders. The fact that Abraham and his descendants were known to others as Ivrim suggests that they too were seen as Habiru, a potential danger to the more settled people of the region. Abraham himself, despite his long residence in Canaan, was forced to describe himself as an alien and a temporary resident when he came to buy land from the local Hittites as a burial place for his wife Sarah. Nor did the Egyptians take readily to outsiders. A text of the time complained that strangers from outside Egypt have come into Egypt. Foreigners have become people everywhere. So it is altogether likely that, faced with a growing population of Semitic herdsmen from Canaan, the Egyptians would have sensed a potential threat. We do not have independent confirmation of the events of the Exodus, but we have enough background information to understand the context in which a pharaoh would say, look, the Israelites have become too numerous for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they'll become even more numerous, and if war breaks out, will join our enemies, fight against us, and leave the country. They make eminent sense given the conditions of the time. With them, a great drama began that was to leave its mark ever afterward on the life of the group whose descendants the Jews of today are. The contrast between the two peoples could not have been greater. Egypt at that time was in an indomitable power. It held sway over the whole ancient Near East. Ramses II conducted successful campaigns against the Hittites and the Libyans and launched punitive raids against Edom and Moab. He used the technical prowess and prosperity of Egypt to undertake a series of monumental building projects that have few rivals in the ancient world. He had colossal statues of himself erected throughout the country. The prefix Ra in his name tells us that he was seen as the sun god, a divine being whose rule was written in the heavens, and whose word carried absolute command. The Israelites, for their part, were a landless people, entirely at the mercy of the Egyptians. They had no power and, at first, no effective leadership. They were easily conscripted into forced labor. The Torah tells us that they were employed to build 2 of Ramses II's great projects, the city of Parathum, and Ramses. No group seemed less likely to become the people of eternity. Had anyone suggested at the time that it would not be the Egypt of the pharaohs that would survive and change the moral landscape of the world, but instead a group of Hebrew slaves, it would have seemed an ultimate absurdity. The Egyptians believed that the Israelites were already on the verge of extinction. The earliest known reference to Israel outside the Bible is an inscription produced by Ramses' successor, Merneptah, in the 13th century BCE. Merneptah's stele, a giant slab of black granite which stands today in the Cairo Museum, contains these words: Israel is laid waste, his seed is no more. Sorry, jumped ahead. The clash between Moses and Ramses was no ordinary encounter. It deserves to be seen in retrospect as one of the defining confrontations of history between the most powerful empire of the ancient world and a powerless group of slave laborers. An immense question was being framed. What endures and what wanes? What survives and what is eclipsed? Ancient Egypt and ancient Israel were two nations that posed the great question of time. How, in a world of flux and change, do we create something that defeats mortality? The Egyptians gave one answer, a response that has long appealed to emperors and kings. We defeat time by building monuments that will outlive the winds and sands of time. Ancient Israel gave a different and altogether counterintuitive reply. We can identify exactly the moment when it occurred. It is set out in the 12th and 13th chapters of the book of Exodus. The Israelites were about to go free. 9 of the 10 plagues had already taken place. The 10th they knew would be the last. According to the biblical account, Moses gathered the people, instructed them on the preparations they were to make. By any standards, it was an epic moment. For 210 years, the Israelites had been in exile. They had experienced suffering, slavery, and attempted genocide. Now, they are about to begin the journey known to history as the Exodus. What would Moses say? He might have spoken about freedom, or the promised destination, the land flowing with milk and honey. He might have chosen to speak about the arduous journey that lay ahead, what Nelson Mandela called the long road to freedom. Any of these would have been the great speech of a great leader. Moses did none of these things. Instead, he spoke about children and the distant future and the duty to pass on memory to generations yet unborn. 3 times he turned to the theme, and we know this from our Haggadah. And when your children ask, what do you mean by this rite? You shall say, and you shall explain to your child on that day, it's because of what the Lord did for me when I went free from Egypt. And when in time to come your child asks you, saying, what does this mean? You shall say to him, about to gain their freedom, the Israelites were told that they were to become a nation of educators. That's what made Moses not just a great leader, but a unique one. Freedom, he was suggesting, is one not on the battlefield, nor in the political arena, but in the human imagination and will. As the American Justice Judge Learned Hand put it, liberty lies in the hearts of men and women. When it dies there, no constitution, no law, no court can save it. No constitution, no law, no court can even do much to help it. To defend a land, you need an army, but to defend freedom, you need education. You need parents, families, and homes, and a constant conversation between the generations. Above all, you need memory. The kind of memory that never forgets the bread of affliction and the bitter herbs of slavery. Freedom is more than revolution. The pages of history are littered with peoples who won their freedom only to lose it again. The Constitution of Liberty is one of the most vulnerable of all human achievements. Individual freedom is simple. Collective freedom, a society that honors the equal dignity of all, depends on constant vigilance, a sustained effort of education. If we forget where we come from, the battles our ancestors fought, and the long journey they had to take, then in the end we lose them. So Moses led his people along the least likely path to eternity. The Israelites became builders. What they constructed were not as monuments of stone. Instead, it was a way of life inspired by the twin ideals of justice and compassion. Its bricks were mitzvot, holy deeds. Its mortar, study and the life of the mind. What Moses taught and what the Jewish people came to discover is that you achieve immortality not by building pyramids or statues, but by engraving your values on the hearts of your children and they on theirs, so that our ancestors live on in us and we in our children, and so on until the end of time. It was an astonishing insight, so unlike anything else in the ancient world that, contemplating it, it's hard not to fell oneself in the presence of transcendence. A totally unpredictable moment when one of the great truths of the human situation emerged for the first time. The people who survived and eventually became a nation of visionaries and prophets, scholars and sages, had little in their immediate past to suggest future greatness, except one thing: a voice heard intermittently since the days of the patriarchs, a summoning of them to a way of life quite different from their neighbors. It said that God is not the power that enslaves, but the power that sets free. Instead of worshiping mighty rulers, it taught that God was to be served by protecting the dignity of the widow, the orphan, the stranger, the weak, the vulnerable, and the neglected. Holiness is found not in monumental architecture, but in words and teachings. Above all, in the instruction that takes place at home. Call them not your children, but your builders, said the sages. And it was an insight Jews did not forget. No civilization, no faith has been seen as child-centered as Judaism. As a result, none has stayed so perennially young, so self-renewing through time. On Passover, telling our story to our children, we relive the secret of Jewish renewal. The men and women who built Ramses' temples lived through one of the great revelations of history. Because of it, the Jewish people became a nation dedicated to bringing new generations into being and handing on to them the heritage of the past. The result was that Jewish identity, and with it the Jewish dream, never died. By telling the Israelites in Egypt to become a nation of educators, Moses turned a group of slaves into a people of eternity. So, question, we can start with this next time because we're at 8 o'clock. Rabbi Sachs frames the Jewish civilization versus Egyptian civilization. 3,000 years later, what's lasting from each? What's lasting today about the Egyptian civilization? What's lasting today, okay, about the Jewish civilization as described by Sachs? And then lasting is one way of looking at it. The other is influential in the world from each. One of the things we talked about as civilization is not just, does it lasting or has it lasted, but does it continue to be influential on not just itself, but others around it. So that's where we'll start next time. I'm looking to see if there's anything, anybody want to make a comment or two before we finish?
Rabbi, would it be possible for you to email us the Sachs article and the questions before next week?
Yep, you got it.
Thank you.
Others?
I just want to say that you sort of capsulized what many of us probably been thinking, but it put it in such a concise terms that it all makes sense.
Sachs is good like that.
Well, you're good for bringing in Sachs.
Jerry, yes, Jerry.
Yeah, I have a question. Alexa, stop. I'm sorry. I have a question. There have been leaders of our country who have called us an ethnicity.
what we call
And recently, in recent history, we've been called an ethnicity. I can remember watching news program where they said Jewish people aren't white. How does that fit into our civilization, these kinds of things that are said?
It's a good question. I'm gonna ask you to hang on to it, because maybe that's a good way for us to get to our third session, right? It's not just others talking about us. That's partly how some of our leaders and talk about ourselves, right? Are we, part of this group? Are we separate? What separates us? Is it just our acceptance by, or is it something different? All right, everybody, to be continued, part 2, same time, same place next week. Be there or be
square. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you later.
Thank you. Appreciate it.